Alright, Deeds of Flesh tier list. 9 albums and a really good EP, and there's no D tier. The lowest I can put is like a very, very high C tier. This is like when your teacher gives back your test and you get a 79.9%, and you're like, I got trolled. Like, where is my 80%? Like, where's the B minus? Like, that's this. This is the highest possible C tier. And I'm gonna first start out with the S tier because it's just the peak. I mean, they have several albums that are peak, but this is top of the top. If you've seen my other video, you would know this is like one of my favorite death metal albums. Or at least like, if we're talking the entire death metal genre, it's like top 15. It's just so good in every way. Love the production. Love just the dark melodic vibe of this album. It's kind of morbid angel-y. Which I can't really say about their other releases. Every song in here is amazing, and they kind of just take you on a journey. I mean, you have the title track with that sample, which is so good. You got Infested Beneath the Earth with that chorus, and then you got Avowed Depraved. Human Trophies is like a very chuggy kind of song, and then the Endurance is just legendary. And then top of A+, I gotta go with the Gradually Melted EP. I have a lot of history with this because this was like probably the third ever brutal death metal release I've heard. It was after I heard Suffocation and I wanted to find more stuff that sounded like that. If you see my other video, I heard the Pyrexia demo on YouTube, their 92 demo, and I loved that. And then afterwards I checked out this, and my god, I was like, this is what I like. Give me more of this. Give me a whole genre of just this. I've probably heard 3 Minute Crawl Space. I mean, I've heard that song countless times, hundreds of times, and I never get tired of it. That song's just perfect. Every song in here is perfect. Deeds of Flesh just came out the gate swinging. The production in here is like better than the first 3 full lengths. Just 3 of like some of the best Deeds of Flesh songs. It's just perfect. And then in a similar vein, these are all 10 out of 10s, by the way. I mean, if you want to get really specific, this is like a true 10 out of 10, and these two are like 9.7 out of 10. But man, Trading Pieces is so good. Trading Pieces is just vicious. It's just like out for blood. The first song, Carnivorous Ways, such a good way to open the album, and then you get the second song, Born Then Torn Apart. You get that 1-2 punch. Such a like amazing, super heavy song, has like some really cool slam parts. And what I really love about Deeds of Flesh is the guitar writing and really the songwriting in general. They always have those anchor riffs, or those like keystone riffs, where they start the song, they play that riff, and even if you're just subconsciously listening, you really latch on to that. And then they'll kind of go off and play a lot of technical stuff with a lot of really fast riff changes and some kind of start and stop stuff. But they always bring it back to that anchor riff, you know, in Carnivorous Ways. You get that dun 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 dun. So goddamn good. And then Hunting Humans is amazing. And the song Deeds of Flesh, kind of a fan favorite. And they bring it back to that anchor riff, that dun 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 da 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 ba da ba da dun 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 da ba da da ba da ba da. Just so catchy. And then in my A tier, and I really want to put this in the A+, but I can't really describe it. I just feel like these albums are a little bit better, even though this is also a perfect album in my opinion. Anthropophagy. And this is when they started to experiment with like themes, because all their albums that came after this, these first 2 are just kind of like gore, like generic stuff, but afterwards they started to have kind of concept albums lyrically. And this one is about this crazy story of, I think it's in Scotland, this like cannibal tribe, or maybe it was just one guy who would like lure people into his cave and kill them and eat them. So all of the song titles, all the lyrics are kind of based around that. You can tell by some of this really fucked up cover art. I love this really creepy art style. I love the way this album starts out with End of All. It's just like a 1-minute song, very fast, nothing really repeats, and then you get that sample at the end. And the first 3 songs that come after that are probably the best on the album. Feeding Time is amazing, the title track's amazing, and my all-time favorite, and one of the best Deeds of Flesh songs, Infecting Them with Falsehood. So many amazing like vocal trade-offs in there. I love, one of my favorite parts of Deeds of Flesh's sound is the vocal trade-offs between Eric Lindmark and Jacoby Kingston. So you get that chorus, that "Bring your children, let me kill them," which just sounds so sick. And Eric going, inviting them into my castle. Just iconic. And then Canvas of Flesh, another kind of chuggy song. Ritual of Battle brings in the melody just a little bit. Fly Shrine isn't quite as memorable, but it's still really cool. And you also get a re-recording of Gradually Melted, which is sick. I prefer the production on the original. The production on here is very kind of hollow. It's actually on Trading Pieces you had a very thin kind of guitar tone. On Anthropophagy it's like even a little bit thinner. It sounds kind of hollow to me, but still really cool. To me, these four is just like the peak of Deeds of Flesh. Like, this is where it's at. This is like, you know, straight A student, like your parents are very proud of you. This tier is like, you know, valedictorian, top of the class, like you probably do some like extracurricular stuff, but like you also kind of have a life, like you're still a turbo nerd, but you still have a life outside of school. And then this right here is like, you are currently winning the national chess tournament. You are probably a dungeon master at your school's D&D club. You're probably insufferable, and you probably have giant buck teeth and stutter more than I do. That's this right here. And then just going chronologically, Path of the Weakening. And I gotta be honest, it's kind of mid. For Deeds of Flesh's standard, it's mid. The problem I have with this is it feels like it's kind of stuck between two eras. Because you have the early era of Deeds of Flesh, which is this right here. Then you have the middle era, which is I consider to be like the melodic era, where you had still kind of like brutal death metal production, but a lot more adventurous songwriting and a lot more melody and kind of epicness. And then you have the third era, which is their tech death era. This is kind of stuck between worlds. It has that like, you know, very ADHD, you know, technical start and stop stuff, but it's not as much as these. It brings in the melody a little bit, but not really. It doesn't really commit to it, and it doesn't sound quite as like epic or grandiose as these other ones. Songwriting on here just isn't quite as memorable. Don't get me wrong, you do have some standout songs. Production wise, it still sounds very thin, but songs like Execute the Anthropophagy and I Die on My Own Terms are very good. And then a step above B tier, this is like solidly in that melodic middle era of Deeds of Flesh. Mark of the Legion. And when you listen to Deeds of Flesh's catalog back to back, this one definitely stands out as being just better than this one. Production wise, they beefed up the guitar tone a lot. This just sounds like a really good old school death metal recording. The first two songs, you get that amazing 1-2 punch. Super catchy. And you get some longer songs in here. This is when they started doing like the 5-minute songs. And thematically, this one seems to be focused on sort of fantasy, talking a lot about battles and war, Vikings. The last song, the instrumental, I think it's called Drink the Blood, is really good. The song that comes before that is really good. So a lot of standout moments. I do feel like it does feel a little overly long. If they made this album 30 to 35 minutes instead of like 41, I might put it a little bit higher. There's no filler on it. I just feel like some of the songs aren't quite as strong. And then next up in the B+ is Crown of Souls, which depending on the day, I might like it more than this one. I might like it a little bit less. But this is an amazing album. I love the guitar tone on here. It reminds me a lot of Consume the Forsaken by Disgorge, which I've used as an example as like perfect modern brutal death metal production. I do feel like the kick drum sounds good, but the snare is a little lacking. It's not quite as punchy, which is a shame because Reduced to Ashes has like a perfect brutal death metal snare sound. A lot of people overlook this one and say that it's one of their weakest, which I just don't understand at all. There's so many good standout songs on here. You get more of that kind of fantasy theme. My favorite song is probably Hammerforged Blade, but the title track is amazing. Medical Murder, a very chuggy song. This Macabre Fetish has some amazing riffs. Crimson Offering is also really good. It's just a really solid album. And then over in C+, we have their first kind of attempt at their very techie sort of style of What's to Come. This is still a good album, you know, it's a C+, B-, sort of a 7.5 out of 10. The production on here is a lot more modern. It sounds way cleaner than every other Deeds of Flesh recording up until this point. But I do feel like it sounds a little bit flat and they would improve on the production more. on these other two. Deeds of Flesh, while they've always been very technical, they've always been focused on songwriting. They've never been the kind of band to be very flashy. This is when they started to get flashy. They started to do a lot of like tapping, the kind of wheedly riffs that you expect from tech death. You get a re-recording of Infecting Them with Falsehood, and you get some good songs like Waters of Space. But overall, I do consider it to be the weakest out of their tech death era. And next is Portals to Canaan, which I honestly like more than Path of the Weakening. Easily stands out to me as their best out of the tech death era, or out of the modern era. Songs on here are really just adventurous. You get entranced in the decades of psychedelic sleep and the rise of the Verbum juggernaut, which in this modern era, they use a lot of similar kind of themes, like they're talking about the Verbum juggernaut and the xenovirus and stuff. And I'm not sure if they're kind of constructing their own narrative, their own story through these lyrics, or if they're drawing on stuff that already exists. It's interesting how these three all have the same kind of theme, like Coheed and Cambria style. Also, probably the sickest looking Deeds of Flesh cover art. The leads on here from Eric Lindmark, some of his best, really stellar stuff. Like I said, I've always loved Eric Lindmark's songwriting, no matter what style of death metal or what style of music he's playing. He's always just a very interesting guitarist for me to listen to. And last is the most recent one, Nucleus. I love how this whole album is just kind of a tribute for Eric Lindmark. It's really cool how almost every song on here features a pretty well-known death metal vocalist, including Luke Lemay from Gorguts, which by the way, they did a cover of one of the best Gorguts songs, Orphans of Sickness, on Portals to Canaan. I'm a big fan of the drumming on here. Production-wise, sounds a lot like Hour of Penance. It's very pummeling, very punchy, but I don't feel like the songs are quite as strong on here as they would be on Portals to Canaan. It's still a really good send-off for Deeds of Flesh. As their last album, it feels like, you know, the end of a chapter, the end of a long story. Hopefully they can continue making new music, but honestly, even though it's one of their weakest, if this is their last album, I would be okay with that. It just seems fitting. Again, you get similar themes, similar characters as these other ones. It's a really good tech death album. If I was more of a fan of tech death, I would probably have it higher, but I am more of a brutal death metal person, so it's going in the C tier. And yeah, this is my official tier list. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to comment your favorite Deeds of Flesh song, your favorite Deeds of Flesh album, and what band should I talk about next. Stay tuned because my next video is going to be a concert review, because I just saw Belphegor the other day and my neck is still very sore from headbanging. So yeah.